Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. The world can be a pretty scary place. While science continues to help us understand more and more about the universe, there are still many great mysteries out there. One such mystery is that of Cthulhu, the great power first described in Lovecraft's short story, The Call of Cthulhu. But what if this ancient being was not bound to the pages of books, but did in fact exist? How might the world change if this creature made itself known? Let's explore. What if Cthulhu was real? Since Cthulhu isn't exactly well known by the everyman, I'll start off with a brief description of the mythos surrounding the creature. It should be noted that Lovecraft originally intended the name to be pronounced closer to Cthulhu, because it originates in an alien language that can't be properly spoken by humans. However, the easier form, Cthulhu, is more prevalent, so that's what I'll be using in this video. Which is great because I haven't spoken alien since high school, so I'm a bit rusty. Cthulhu is believed to have been born on the planet Vorl in the 23rd nebula from Nug and Yeb, before traveling to Earth with his family and shape-shifting worshippers called the Starspawn. Here, great wars were held between his group and other mythical races, eventually giving way to peace as they decided to share the Earth. Cthulhu later began hibernating in the sunken city of R'lyeh, where, according to legend, he remains to this day. However, legend speaks of cults that continue to worship the old god even while he lies dormant. Physically, Cthulhu was described by Lovecraft as, quote, a monster of vaguely anthropoid outline, but with an octopus-like head whose face was a mass of feelers, a scaly, rubbery-looking body, prodigious claws on hind and fore feet, and long, narrow wings behind. It has been described as a hideous combination of a man, an octopus, and a dragon. Generally depicted as being hundreds of meters tall, Cthulhu was seemingly created with the intent of striking fear and disgust into the hearts of men. This proved to be highly relevant in the myths, as it's claimed that merely gazing upon Cthulhu would cause the viewer to go insane. The myths say that Cthulhu will eventually awaken from its slumber and will rise to once again take over the world. So let's imagine a world where this beast existed. How might it differ from the world we know? Well, if Cthulhu remained asleep, nothing much would change. Those who found the creature deep in the ocean would go insane and likely die before even telling others about the find. Even if they made it back to land, their stories wouldn't be believed, due both to the extraordinary claims and, more importantly, their lack of sanity. However, even a dormant Cthulhu certainly isn't impotent. According to legend, Cthulhu continues to influence the world in a few ways. For one, its telepathic abilities allow it to enter the minds of people around the world. Not only that, the followers of Cthulhu are believed to be constantly working to bring about the god's return, often engaging in human sacrifice. However, if Cthulhu were to be awoken, it would be a very different story altogether. If Cthulhu awoke and began roaming the earth, madness would sweep the globe. All who saw the beast would go insane, with the world quickly falling apart. Cthulhu would likely surface in the South Pacific, as that's where R'lyeh is believed to be. He would either travel east towards Chile or west towards New Zealand. When word spread of the mass insanity due to a giant elder god, countries around the world would do whatever possible to take it out, regardless of the collateral damage. Nuking New Zealand, as horrific as it would be far better than allowing the world to fall into madness. Unfortunately, humanity's attacks would likely be ineffective. In most depictions of Cthulhu, it's claimed that it would simply reform after destruction if hit with a nuclear bomb, much like it did in one story after being cut in half. Furthermore, it could be that the Earth would become overrun by the spawn of Cthulhu. It's believed by some that this alien race known for worshipping the Great One was created by Cthulhu himself, and upon awakening, he would once again bring them to life, to act as his foot soldiers and to lead the human slaves. As if the hulking behemoth wasn't enough to deal with, now we'd have terrifying shape-shifting creatures in the mix. This would make it essentially impossible for humanity to come out on top, or even find a place to hide. All this means that humanity would be more or less powerless to stop Cthulhu, who would take over the Earth, once again reclaiming it for itself and its worshippers. Those humans who survived might be allowed to keep their sanity in return for subservience, but the Earth and humanity as we know it would likely be gone forever. And now we return to our question, what if Cthulhu was real? Well, if it stayed asleep at the bottom of the ocean, the world would be much the same, aside from the odd sacrifice and confusing dream. However, if it was awoken, there's a good chance that humanity would be done for. With little chance of harming the Great One, we would most likely either be destroyed, driven mad, or enslaved. So let's all cross our fingers and hope that this is, in fact, just a myth. Cthulhu and Jörmungandr, the world serpent. Will Cthulhu wrap the great snake up in a bow, or will the world serpent gulp Cthulhu down like he's a giant disturbing rat? Let's explore. What if Cthulhu fought the world serpent? First of all, if you haven't watched our videos on Cthulhu and the World Serpent, I would advise doing so. It will give you a broader understanding of the two. However, for those who just don't feel like clicking away right now, I'll briefly go over each of our combatants before we try to work out who would come out on top. Starting off with Cthulhu, Cthulhu is the high priest of the Great Old Ones, an ancient alien civilization. He began hibernating beneath the earth following a great war with the Elder Gods. He is a being of grotesque appearance, so hideous and incomprehensible to humans that one is said to go insane if one gazes upon him. He's an anthropoid creature with a head like an octopus, a massive tentacles, a scaly, rubbery body, and long, narrow wings. Since Cthulhu has not actually succeeded in rising to the surface in literature, it's difficult to say precisely how powerful he would be. While in his slumber, he is able to enter the dreams of humans and influence them in a number of ways, and given his size, it's clear that he would be rather physically strong. However, given the abilities of other beings who have risen, he would likely be significantly more powerful on the surface. For example, Xoth-Amog is only able to enter dreams while underground, but on the surface, he's able to enter the waking minds of his foes. In this way, Cthulhu's psychic abilities would be even more powerful in this fight than they were in the mythos. Moving on to the world serpent, Jormungandr is a sea serpent originating in Norse mythology. It's said to encircle Midgard, the name for the earth in Norse mythology, holding its tail in its mouth to complete the ring. In the mythology, it's said that Jormungandr would set off Ragnarok and the end of the world as we know it. Of course, if Jormungandr is large enough to wrap around the world, it is truly a massive beast, significantly larger than Cthulhu. Based on artistic depictions, it seems that it is not particularly thick, but it's said that it is capable of swallowing a god or a giant whole, which is no small feat. It's difficult to determine just how powerful the beast is, since it really only fights against Thor, but it does have deadly venom. However, it is generally considered to be of rather low intelligence, which could hinder it in this fight. So how might this fight go? Well, let's look at how each fighter might defeat their opponent. If we were to imagine how Cthulhu might defeat the World Serpent, we would need to have a good look at his abilities. While Cthulhu is quite powerful, he isn't believed to have godly physical strength, and likely wouldn't be able to defeat the World Serpent using only brawn. That snake is tough. For this reason, he would depend more on his psychic abilities in this fight. Of course, Cthulhu's ability to turn any human insane just by looking at him almost certainly wouldn't work on the World Serpent, but that isn't the only power at his disposal. He's also capable of impressive psychic feats, able to invade dreams and enter the minds of others. Normally, this might not work on such a powerful foe, but considering Jormungandr is generally believed to be of rather low intelligence, it just might be able to be influenced. This way, Cthulhu could cause it to either quit the fight or kill itself, however he saw fit. On the other hand, however, it's possible that the lack of intelligence would work in the World Serpent's favor, since it might not be capable of being convinced of anything. It might also be further protected by its godly ancestry, allowing it to shake off any influence that might take hold. When looking at how the World Serpent might beat Cthulhu, it's significantly more straightforward. As I said, it takes a hell of a lot of power to hurt Cthulhu. Luckily for the World Serpent, it has a heck of a lot of power. With such great mass, it could deal with Cthulhu in a number of ways. It could constrict the Great Old One until he was compressed into a ball. It could use its powerful venom through a series of bites to eventually take Cthulhu down. Heck, it could probably just coil up on top of the Great Old One and win. Since much of Cthulhu's power comes from his psychic abilities, he would be hard-pressed to defend against a physical assault from Jormungandr. Of course, it's important to note that Cthulhu is quite intelligent. There's a chance that even if he was unable to psychically influence the World Serpent, he would be able to trick it into making a fatal error, which Cthulhu could then exploit. However, despite the vast difference in intelligence, the World Serpent is so large and so strong that it would be difficult for Cthulhu to think his way out of danger. Lucky for Cthulhu, there's a chance that he would be able to regenerate. Unluckily, he would probably do so inside the belly of the World Serpent. And now we return to our question, what if Cthulhu fought the World Serpent? Well, it depends. At the end of the day, this fight would come down to whether or not Cthulhu was able to sufficiently influence the World Serpent mentally. If he couldn't, and this came down to a physical bout, the ridiculously enormous size of the World Serpent, as well as its toughness and venom, would make it no contest. However, if Cthulhu was able to get inside the head of the Great Serpent, he could indeed win the fight, either by just forcing the snake to return to its place around the earth, or if he was feeling particularly spiteful, he might even force it to swallow itself.
Have you ever woken up in a cold sweat, half remembering a dream you absolutely couldn't explain? Maybe there was an inexplicable landscape full of strange architecture covered in unrecognizable surfaces. Or perhaps there was a monster, a gigantic beast in silhouette, only explainable in segments. If these are familiar experiences, you might have been visited by the depths dweller himself, Cthulhu. Worry not, you won't suffer long. If he's reaching out like that, the end times are nigh anyway. Or maybe it was just a nightmare brought on by bad takeout. Who's to say? What if Cthulhu existed today? Before we begin, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more tentacled terror. Outstanding! Let's get started. Now, Cthulhu is one of the better known figures from H.P. Lovecraft's collective works. In fact, he might be more popular than his creator at this point. While those interested in cosmic horror likely know HP quite well at this point, the general media-consuming public likely recognizes the name Cthulhu. Most folks are aware that he's a tentacle-covered giant demigod of sorts, which is mostly right, I suppose. Now, there are plenty of Cthulhu explainer videos out there these days, so I'll trust you to do some digging if you need additional context. So let's ask the big question. What if Cthulhu existed today? It's not too far-fetched to say he likely does. See, Cthulhu was once above the water, roaming the world like any great old one might. However, these days he seems to be slumbering eternal beneath the Pacific, dreaming in his underwater city of Relaya. For argument's sake, we can claim that there isn't a 0% chance that Cthulhu is dwelling in the depths, never to be found by the average human. If we take that at face value, we can say with some degree of confidence that if Cthulhu existed today, not much would change. The world would still turn, people would still live their lives, dogs would still chase squirrels, the works. However, that is the simplest possible answer. It's easy to say that if Cthulhu existed, he would just continue sleeping. But there's a lot more to consider when a great old one exists. See, Cthulhu inspired many devoted followers. So devoted, you might even call them cultists. And these cultists formed groups and congregations and sewing circles, and these folks organized together and formed bigger cults. Cults devoted to worshipping Cthulhu and attempting to bring him out of his eternal slumber. As a great old one, Cthulhu once knew all that was occurring in the universe. He understood things that humans could never hope to understand. The basis of cosmic horror indeed. However, Cthulhu was willing to share some of this knowledge for a price. Before being relegated to the underwater city, he would communicate with chosen people through dreams. Through doing so, he established his cult. Word spread and cells popped up all over the world. It became so prevalent that even when he was trapped under the sea, his worshippers continued to worship. You see, the ocean is deep and vast, which makes it hard for even a godlike creature such as Cthulhu to transmit his messages. The telepathic communication has been weakened, meaning that only rarely does a message make it to the surface. That doesn't slow the cult down one bit, though. The cells of worshippers continue to congregate around the world, best known for their practice of chanting. Over and over again, they will say the ancient and unknowable words. In his house at Relaya, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. This can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, but most of the time people assume that it means he's waiting for his followers to wake him up. It's been said, that is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. So Cthulhu isn't dead, at least not in any way that matters. And death apparently isn't the end, which allows for a lovely Cthulhu awakening to be in the cards. This quasi-immortality might actually be a draw for many of his worshippers too. If Cthulhu can live forever, why wouldn't he be able to grant that to his followers, right? That might actually be the case if you look at some different accounts of his followers. Human leaders of his cult appear to be immortal in some cases, drawing on dark and arcane powers to extend their life far beyond the span of a regular person. In doing so, they also inspire others to follow Cthulhu with promises of similar power being granted somewhere down the line. Eternal life tends to get a lot of people interested in worship, huh? And it's not just humans that benefit from this either. If you take a trip to the murky depths just outside of Innsmouth, you'll find all sorts of deep ones. These freakish aquatic humanoids also worship Cthulhu, and the biggest and baddest of them seem to live and grow forever. Even after reaching maturity, their size increases. They also tend to come ashore and mate with humans, creating strange halflings equally devoted to the terrifying dreamer. To summarize what we've discussed so far, if Cthulhu existed today, we'd have a lot more cultists and a lot more immortality, and probably some crazy gigantic aquatic beasts. That's pretty fun, right? Of course, these results only happen if he remains asleep at the bottom of the ocean. If he were to awaken, it would be a whole other story. There are a few different ways this could happen, too. I think that one that a bunch of people might be familiar with involves a spiteful fat kid and some superhero cosplay.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we are pleased to announce the successful merger of Cthulhu and the Coon. Cthulhu's track record for complete dominance and interdimensionary rule is without question.
Definitely not canon or anything close to it, but there was a story arc in a season of South Park where an oil drilling company releases Cthulhu for a period of time. Cartman then decides that he can manipulate the Great Old One, as he does with all the other people in his life, and begins waging war on the things he believes are evil. Then Mintberry Crunch comes in and sends Cthulhu back to where he came from. Again, definitely not how it would really play out, but it's an interesting take on how Cthulhu might enter our realm. And it actually does sort of stick to the story from the Call of Cthulhu. In H.P. Lovecraft's tale concerning the Cultic Creeps, a ship full of sailors actually manages to open a portal to the underwater city, so not too far off in terms of the whole summoning bit. And of course, the summoning is just the beginning. Once Cthulhu enters our world, it's all over. Without deep sleep and deeper waters keeping his legendary telepathic powers at bay, Cthulhu would be more powerful than we could ever understand. He'd subjugate Earth in a matter of moments, with members of his cult being rewarded for their loyalty, and heathens being enslaved or killed instantly. It would all be too much for our tiny human brains. Classic cosmic horror, right? The introduction of Cthulhu into our world also implies a whole lot of other cosmic beings as well. Cthulhu is the figurehead in what is known as the Cthulhu mythos, a series of tales by assorted authors about cosmic entities in the same universe as the Great Slumberer. Without getting too deep into it, we'd also likely be introduced to his progeny, Yog-Sothoth, Yog-Sothoth, Xothamog, and Cthulhu, his mates, Idhya and Kasagtha, his siblings, Hastur, Cathanid, and Nraku, and his ancestors, Yog-Sothoth and Shub-Niggurath. All of these beings come with their own set of troubles. Yog-Sothoth might father another half-cosmic, half-human child, like in the Dunwich Horror. Yog-Sothoth might freeze some folks like Medusa, but leave their minds to rot in an immobile shell for all of eternity. Maybe Hastur would leave the yellow sign all over for hapless folks to stumble upon and become indoctrinated by. So many opportunities in this mythos, so little hope for humanity. The world would be a much darker, much more mysterious place if Cthulhu existed today. I'm sure plenty of investigative journalists and scholars would try to infiltrate the cult and find more info too. Of course, this would come with its own slew of horrors and misfortunes. How is a writer supposed to explain their encounter with an indescribable being? Maybe we'd get some video footage of true horror. Although who's to say you can even capture any of it on video? And that just about brings us to our conclusion. If Cthulhu existed today, we'd see an uptick in cult activity, maybe even immortality. If he were to awaken, we'd all be screwed, no question about it. There's also a lot of room for other beings from the Cthulhu mythos to appear. All in all, we'd be terrified a whole lot more often.
We thank our lucky stars that we don't own a sea view apartment, buy ourselves a one-way ticket all the way to the Arctic Circle while we wait for this whole thing to blow over, as we suspiciously ask the question, what if Cthulhu fought Godzilla? Roll the clip. Now, there's a lot of exposition here that could potentially hinder our results, the majority of which come down to which varying fictional versions of both Godzilla and Cthulhu that we present. In most scenarios, both Godzilla and Cthulhu are such vastly opposing entities that they'd probably never even notice each other's presence. But that's not any fun at all, is it? We want to see some cataclysmic showdown that sunders the planet smack bang down the middle, great thundering behemoths going toe to toe in an abyssal melee that heralds the beginning of the cosmos tearing itself apart. So, in the words of Maximus Decimus Meridius, are you not entertained? Our boy Cthulhu, the Sleeper of R'lyeh, the High Priest of the Great Old Ones, is a fictional cosmic entity created by the grandfather of science fiction horror himself, Howard Phillips Lovecraft. And since his first inky inception in 1928's The Call of Cthulhu, he's been so prevalent in modern culture that you'll even find his tumultuous tendrils painted on a children's lunchbox. But that's no grand feat compared to the god of destruction, the king of the monsters himself, Godzilla, who's no stranger to the artistic immortalization of Tupperware. Godzilla's first appearance was in Ishiro Honda's 1954 silver screen apocalypse of the same name, which swiftly launched the King Lizard into the lofty ranks of monstrous cultural icons. Since then, both of these world-ending buddies have seen scores of recreations and canonical additions that have augmented their varying campaigns of destruction. First, we should hone in on what makes these big guys tick, and the arsenal they've got to play with under their metaphorical hoods. Since his time spent on the silver screen, Godzilla has thrown down with some of the most powerful entities in the cosmos. He's racked up a staggering 58 bouts throughout his time as the king of the monsters, notching 42 wins, 7 losses, and 9 draws. That's a pretty impressive ratio, considering that Godzilla isn't exactly battling for entertainment, but more to be the destroyer or savior of the planet. Let's not beat around the bush. Godzilla is incredibly powerful, so let's not dismiss him as some giant lizard that breathes atomic energy. Godzilla towers in at over 118 meters tall, which varies on the version, but we'll use Shin Godzilla as a benchmark, and weighs in at a staggering 100,000 tons. Just his heart measures 60 feet across and weighs 100 tons, pumping 530,000 gallons of blood around his enormous frame. He's resistant to nuclear blasts and all manner of humanity's modern weaponry, and he can bring the world's greatest armies to their knees with a mere belch. Godzilla's most iconic means of destruction is his trademark atomic breath, which, while it sounds like a grotesque cloud of miasma, is actually a highly concentrated beam attack of unbridled atomic energy that can level entire cities without breaking a sweat. Combine that with his spiral heat ray, his nuclear pulse, and his nigh immortal durability, and Godzilla is looking like quite the contender in this hypothetical bout. In fact, in the Godzilla in Hell storyline, a comic miniseries released in 2015, Godzilla himself marches into Hell and annihilates Satan, and to bring his point home, he even brings down the big guy upstairs. Forget that though, because Godzilla has even killed Zeus, the father of the Greek pantheon, so as far as gods go, the god of destruction really does live up to his namesake. But what about great old ones, which, if I'm being honest, is where this showdown is ultimately decided. Comparatively, Cthulhu is incredibly weak when you stand him up against Lovecraft's Yog-Sothoth. At the bottom of the pecking order, we've got the great old ones, where Cthulhu resides as their high priest. Granted, pretty powerful, but above that we have the elder gods, arguably of equal strength, but who regularly successfully oppose the great old ones. And then we have the outer gods, who, let's face it, are the most powerful entities in the cosmos. It's not even worth trying to pit opponents against them, because no matter how hard you try, you can't brawl against the intangible. Put it this way, in the Call of Cthulhu, the sleeping god is defeated by ramming a small tugboat into him, ripping his head apart like an exploded bladder. Lovecraft's words, not mine. A freaking boat ripped him in two. What do you think Godzilla would do to him? But here's the thing, and I know it's not the answer you wanted, but it's the answer you need. In his house at R'lyeh, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. It doesn't matter what you do to him, sleeping or semi-awake, Cthulhu can only and will only bring destruction when the stars are correctly aligned. Even if he's defeated, he'll regenerate or be rebirthed by his daughter wife Cthulhu. Godzilla wins this battle hands down. The king of the monsters is just far too powerful, even compared to the majority of the Cthulhu mythos. But it'd be like watching a rabid dog tear apart a fluffy new pillow that also happens to constantly regenerate itself in an eternal cycle of abyssal slumber. Yeah, that's an image that I'll just let you ponder on. Let that sink in.
Cthulhu, also known as a Great Old One, or more specifically, High Priest of the Great Old Ones, is one of the most powerful, evil fictional creatures out there. Standing hundreds of yards tall with the ability to shapeshift, retract or protrude tentacles, and of course control minds like no other, it'd be quite tough to take him down. And then we have Siren Head. With dried out mummified skin, a megaphone of sorts for a head that can rotate 360 degrees, standing at 40 feet in height, and with arms the length of his body, this guy is no joke either. So what if we pin these two against each other? Let's find out what would happen. So I think the common consensus here is that it wouldn't be much of a fight. Cthulhu is clearly the bigger, more powerful one. He, if I could even call Cthulhu a he, wouldn't have much of an opponent in Siren Head. Or so we think. We know a lot about Cthulhu. We know his origin, his offsprings, how powerful he is, and what his main purpose is. And that is why I feel this would be an intriguing battle. We don't know all that much about Siren Head. Sure, we know he has the mummified skin, stands at 40 feet in height, and has arms the length of his body. But we have no idea where he came from, and what he's fully capable of. Siren Head lures his victims into the woods using the voices of loved ones, sure, but how he kills seems to be a big question mark. Even if he eats his victims, which would be tough to do with Cthulhu, that doesn't answer the question of what he does with them before killing. Can Siren Head transform? Does he rip his victims limb from limb? All of these questions are unanswered. So at first glance, it may seem as though Cthulhu would be able to make a meal of Siren Head. But looking further into it, it's a hard fight to dissect because we don't even know Siren Head's full capabilities. Even if Cthulhu had his cult attack the 40-foot telephone pole looking guy, Siren Head's counter could be getting into their head as well. Using voices of those they love the most, Siren Head's abilities could possibly outpower Cthulhu's. More specifically, although Cthulhu has the ability to make minds go mad, Siren Head may be able to use the voices of the loved ones to break Cthulhu's spell. Much like those movies or TV shows where someone or something is being possessed or controlled by something evil, only to have them snap out of the trance at the last second because the real version of them, for lack of a better word, is still inside the body. Still, even though we can't say for sure how powerful Siren Head's abilities are, nor do we know what other abilities he's capable of, it seems this one would inevitably go to Cthulhu. Even if somehow, someway Siren Head was able to gain control of Cthulhu's cult or minions, the Great Old One is far too powerful. With the ability to shapeshift into anything, which technically would include Siren Head, it seems Cthulhu would be the winner of this battle. Of course, an interesting twist in the fight could be that Siren Head uses the shrieks or voice of Cthulhu, the offspring and entity responsible for the second coming of Cthulhu, should he die. This may lead to Cthulhu being off his game, which may give Siren Head a slight advantage. That being said, Cthulhu seems to be all-knowing. I mean, after all, he is a god, and because he is a god, I think a safe assumption to make would be that the clear winner of this one would in fact be Cthulhu. Although there could be possible scenarios that see Siren Head come away with the victory, I'm going to say 99% of the time, the winner is Cthulhu. What if Nyarlathotep fought Cthulhu? Now before we see how this fight would pan out, let's talk about each one of these creatures, or gods, are. What they are capable of, how they behave, and then who would win in a fight between the two. Starting with Nyarlathotep, the outer god who could take the form or shape of pretty much anything and everything. Nyarlathotep also has a ton of other names, such as the Crawling Chaos, Face Eater, Father of all Bats, the Skinless One. Really, I could go on and on. It seems this guy has 20 plus names. Most likely due to the fact that he turns into different types of creatures, or beings, or gods, or whatever you'd call it. Unlike the majority of Lovecraft's other outer gods, or great old ones, Nyarlathotep is quite destructive. Not to say Lovecraft's other creations aren't, but in comparison, Nyarlathotep is one of the worst. I mean, this is in the sense that he has a goal to destroy, whereas the others have the ability, but no real purpose or agenda. Nyarlathotep is known to be a messenger of sorts for the other outer gods and prefers to just spread destruction and madness among his victims rather than just kill him. Another important distinction between Nyarlathotep and Lovecraft's other work, including Cthulhu, Nyarlathotep can walk the earth, speak human languages, and blend into our everyday society. This could certainly work to his advantage, whether he wanted to take over the earth or build an army to help fight Cthulhu. In this case, it'd be the latter. And speaking of Cthulhu, let's talk about him next. Is it even a him? Probably shouldn't assume. Either way, Cthulhu is easily the most popular and well-known creation from Lovecraft. Featured or referenced in comics, video games, TV shows, movies, you name it, Cthulhu has conquered it. So what is Cthulhu and what is it capable of? Well, for starters, Cthulhu is known to have quite a large cult following. That being said, Cthulhu is believed to be in a deep slumber, more specifically, a death-like slumber. Although Cthulhu is incredibly powerful, unlike Nyarlathotep, Cthulhu doesn't necessarily set out to destroy, at least while sleeping. Upon Cthulhu's awakening, the plan would be to take over and destroy the Earth. In regards to appearance, Cthulhu is described as a mix of a dragon, octopus, and human, with a massive scaly body and a tentacled head. Some claim Cthulhu also had wings of sorts. However, it's also been stated that Cthulhu's true form is incomprehensible to the human eye. So who knows what Cthulhu really looks like? The version we see is only the version we can perceive Cthulhu as, when in reality, Cthulhu may be much larger or grotesque than meets the eye. Alright, so now that we have some backstory on these two, what happens if they fight each other? Well, there's a few ways to look at this, and unfortunately, I will say now, it's hard to state a clear winner. Let's explore why that is. For starters, Nyarlathotep, if he wanted to, could technically transform into Cthulhu. Nyarlathotep is a master shapeshifter, meaning regardless of Cthulhu's size, Nyarlathotep can always make himself bigger. However, we don't fully understand how powerful Cthulhu really is due to the fact that it's been in a deep slumber under the ocean. Upon awakening, Cthulhu could take over or destroy the world, the same thing Nyarlathotep is set out to do. So clearly both powerful enough gods, or beings, that they could both destroy the Earth. They also have their own armies in a sense. As previously mentioned, Cthulhu has a cult following, the Cult of Cthulhu, real original. Nyarlathotep has the ability to be extremely manipulative and transform into that of a human, so who's to say he couldn't lead the entire human race on a hunt to destroy the evil Cthulhu? See what I'm getting at here? The battle between these two wouldn't be just that. Instead, it'd be the army of Cthulhu, aka his worshippers, going against whoever Nyarlathotep has manipulated into fighting alongside him, or I guess for him. Ultimately, those who were coerced into this war would most certainly be killed by the beings that are Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep. When it came down to the head-to-head battle, it really is tough to dissect who would win the fight and why. Given the circumstances that Nyarlathotep can morph into anyone or anything, I would say he has the advantage. Regardless of Cthulhu's size, Nyarlathotep would definitely morph into something bigger and more powerful. Of course, Cthulhu awakening would most certainly mean the end of the world and human civilization as we know it. If these two were to duke it out, it seems Nyarlathotep would ultimately have the upper hand. But as previously mentioned, between Cthulhu's cult and Nyarlathotep's manipulative ways, I think the battle between these two may start a World War III of sorts. Whoever isn't being controlled by Cthulhu would be controlled by Nyarlathotep, and that would leave two groups fighting on behalf of these gods. When one of the groups perished, the god without any soldiers left, if you'd call them that, would easily kill any human. Ultimately, this battle would see the human race pinned against each other, depending whose war they're fighting. When Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep actually were to come face to face, Nyarlathotep would have the upper hand and most likely destroy Cthulhu. However, Nyarlathotep enjoys destruction and chaos, which could lead to his downfall. Looking at the other side of things, Cthulhu would certainly do everything in its power to kill Nyarlathotep once and for all, whereas Nyarlathotep would most likely try to find ways to torture or prolong the death of Cthulhu. The beautiful thing about Lovecraft's work is that there is so much room for imagination, creativity, and interpretation to come into play. My version of Cthulhu may be different from your version, and the same goes for Nyarlathotep. These fictional creatures are just that, fictional, and in regards to Lovecraft's work, it seems to be quite ambiguous. Now thankfully, the end of the world isn't near, at least that we're aware of, and these two will never get to the point that their battle leads to the destruction of the world and the human race.
Both Yog-Sothoth and Cthulhu are mythical beings from the work of fiction Cthulhu Mythos by H.P. Lovecraft. They are both extremely powerful and both quite mysterious. One an all-seeing god, another a giant extraterrestrial with psychic powers. But what would happen if both of these beings battled it out for supremacy? Who would win? That's the question we're asking today on Life's Biggest Questions. Before we can determine the outcome of a fight between Yog-Sothoth and Cthulhu, I'm going to have to briefly explain traits of both of these beings so that we're all on the same page. According to H.P. Lovecraft, the Yog-Sothoth is a powerful cosmic deity whose appearance is a conglomeration of glowing spheres. It is said that even looking at Yog-Sothoth or learning too much about it can drive mere humans to the brink of insanity, which is why physical descriptions of it are limited. Yog-Sothoth is quite possibly one of the most powerful of Lovecraft's deities, sometimes referred to as the Key and the Gate. It is an outer god, meaning it is a god to gods. Yog-Sothoth sees and knows all. It exists and has existed at all points in time in the multiverse. If you wish to please Yog-Sothoth, you would have to either offer it a human sacrifice or eternal servitude. It should also be noted that Yog-Sothoth dwells outside our reality and doesn't obey our laws of physics. For more information on Yog-Sothoth, I highly recommend you check out our video, What If Yog-Sothoth Was Real? Clickable on the screen right now. Now let's move on to Cthulhu, who is likely the most iconic being from the Cthulhu mythos. Cthulhu is the most powerful of the Great Old Ones. For those who are unfamiliar with the term, the Old Ones refers to a group of extraterrestrials that now lie dormant. Cthulhu is the great priest of this race, and he also once ruled the earth. That being said, Cthulhu is a child of gods, not an actual god. According to the Cthulhu mythos, the Great Old Ones are not the most powerful gods in existence. In terms of appearance, Cthulhu is a monster that's a cross between a man, an octopus, and a dragon. He has an octopus-like head, a base made up of scaly feelers, and is hundreds of meters tall. Like Yog-Sothoth, if a human even so much as looked at Cthulhu, they would go insane. Cthulhu also has impressive psychic abilities. He's extremely intelligent, and he also possesses the ability to invade dreams. If you're interested in hearing some more about Cthulhu, I highly recommend you check out our video, What If Cthulhu Was Real? Also clickable on the screen right now. So now that you know a little about each of them, let's explore what would happen if Yog-Sothoth and Cthulhu decided to battle it out. Even though Cthulhu is a very powerful monster, based on his descriptions, he doesn't have godlike strength, unlike Yog-Sothoth, who is said to be all-powerful. Lovecraft did create a hierarchy when it came to his entities. If it were a contest between two earthly beings, it would be somewhat of a fair fight. However, as I stated previously, Yog-Sothoth is an outer god. It dwells outside our reality. It sees everything, past, present, and future, and can also manipulate any place and time that it wishes. To Cthulhu, Yog-Sothoth is God. If Cthulhu ever dared to take on Yog-Sothoth, Yog would know every move Cthulhu would make before he made it. He would know the outcome of the fight like how he knows how the universe began and how it will end. Only an outer god could defeat another outer god like Yog-Sothoth. The outer gods include both Yog-Sothoth, Nyarlathotep, and Azathoth. They are so powerful that they literally do not care about earthly beings. We are like ants to them. Perhaps if Cthulhu sought the help of Azathoth, who is said to be the most powerful of the outer gods, he could defeat Yog-Sothoth. But that sounds like a topic for another Life's Biggest Questions, and frankly, I'm pretty tired of saying all these weird names.
Oh, it is a showdown, ladies and gents, an apex predator and a Lovecraftian sea menace, the Titanoboa versus Cthulhu. Who will win, the great big snake or the tentacle-faced mind mischief? Isn't it obvious? Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, where we throw caution and our channel name to the wind at regular intervals. Why? Because you have questions and we want to answer them. I'm your host Rebecca Felgate, and today I'm asking, what if the Titanoboa snake fought Cthulhu? Why? Well, because according to your viewing stats, you guys love a snake and you love Cthulhu. And while you can't milk either of these creatures because they no longer exist or perhaps never did, you can milk a trend. A beautiful, scaly trend. Okay, so Cthulhu is a god/monster invented by author H.P. Lovecraft, who describes him as a monster of vaguely anthropoid outline but with octopus-like head, whose face was a mass of feelers, a scaly rubbery looking body, prodigious claws on hind and 4 feet, and long narrow wings. So, tentacle face, rubbery but clawy, and wings. Cool. Got ya. Thanks, HP. The Titanoboa was a very real, very scary giant snake that lived for 2 million years, but went extinct 60 million years ago. So before we even fight this pair, what would happen in a battle of looks? Which is the most ferocious upon the eye? I'm gonna be honest, a giant snake is a scary sight, but the Cthulhu is not only terrifying to look at, but has the ability to drive a person or animal who looks at it insane. Oh dear, things aren't looking great for old Snakey, are they? Cthulhu has got into his brain. That isn't even the half of it. Not only will looking at Cthulhu get inside your mind, but the creature can also control minds. That being said, it is also claimed that the Cthulhu can only control those with creative brains. Rational and mundane minds are not said to be able to handle the beast. So, perhaps the primordial snake's simplicity would save it from mind control. So how would these creatures measure up? Isn't it always about size in a fight? The Titanoboa was thought to be the largest snake that ever existed and the largest non-marine creature to ever live. Snaky Baby was thought to be around 12.8 meters in length, so 42 feet, which is roughly the size of a house. The snake was heavy at around 2,500 pounds, so around 1,133 kilos. We never really hear exactly how big Cthulhu is. Lovecraft describes him as a mountain, so I'm assuming pretty spectacular. An extensive Reddit thread on the topic decided the monster would be a modest 160 feet, so that's around 48 meters, much bigger than the snake. And also, while the snake could slither up trees, Cthulhu has wings, and wings really are an advantage. How does the Titanoboa kill? Well, despite being a woesome snake with huge fangs, it wasn't venomous. It could take a good chunk out of you and cause a wound big enough for you to bleed out, but its main jam is squeezing animals to death. It is thought that the Titanoboa was able to crush its prey with a force of 400 pounds per square inch. Would this even hurt the much bigger Cthulhu? Well, perhaps it could, but the Titanoboa would again have to catch the creature first, and once again, wings. Wings! We never really hear about the Cthulhu in combat. All we know is that it supposedly sends its adversaries mad at the point of death. In reality, if the Cthulhu fought the Titanoboa, then it would very much be a case of the Cthulhu flying out of reach of the snake and sending it mad, so it bit itself and squeezed itself to death. What a sight that would be, but like, come on, how is it ever going to go any other way? The Cthulhu is an elder god, and the snake, however fearsome and big it was, is just a snake. One final thought for you though. Cthulhu is a great creation. Well done, Lovecraft. But the Titanoboa was real. In terms of the real world, the Titanoboa is much scarier because we know it slithered the earth for 2 million years, whereas Lovecraft's monster has only been engaging minds for 90 years. In this respect, the Cthulhu has some ways to go before we put a crown on that horrifyingly tentacled head. So guys, that was the Cthulhu vs Titanoboa. What do you guys think to this video? Will you ever be able to get the image of a huge snake biting and squeezing itself to death in a fit of madness out of your brain? No, us either. But that's why we love making these videos for you. While you're down there leaving us a comment, why don't you like this video and share it with a friend?